good morning, everyone. Hopefully everyone's having a nice VMworld. So this is implementing NSX in a healthcare environment. We have a couple of domain experts in the area who've gone through the implementation of NSX, and we'll go through a round of introductions. First, the disclaimer. I'm sure none of you read this, so we're going to go bullet by bullet. And I'm just kidding. We'll keep moving. So why are we talking NSX and distributed firewall and securing our environment? So especially in healthcare, which is at risk, and a growing trend in that market is the number of breaches, and not only that, but the cost of those breaches, not only to the organizations, but to everyone in here. How many people in here have a electronic medical record in some system? Participation is great. Thank you. Another thing here, we want to keep it open. I'm going to ask some questions to our panelists. But if you have a question, please come up to the mic. If you can't make it to the mic, shout, and we'll try to repeat it. I don't hear so well, so one of these guys are going to have to repeat it back so we can all hear the question. I'll go through introduction. So my name is Mike Lonzi. I'm a healthcare strategist at VMware. And my team focuses on solutions and strategy. So how do we take VMware products and make point solutions within the healthcare market? One of those things is care system security, which we'll talk a little bit about today. But that's taking NSX and securing an EMR environment. I worked for Epic as an architect for 11 and a half years prior to coming to VMware. And I have a long history of working with VMware and VMware products, which eventually has kind of led me down that path. So next up, we have Nick.
Hey, Nick Aguilar. I'm a lead systems engineer for Nebraska Medicine. My responsibilities are infrastructure, end user computing, NSX, automation, monitoring. What do you got? Take care of it.
Brandon.
Howdy, my name is Brandon Rivera. I'm with Christus Health. I'm infrastructure architect. I've been with Christus a little over 7 years. We're a nonprofit Catholic-based hospital headquartered in Irving, Texas. We have operations in a lot of southeastern Texas, Louisiana, and some surrounding states. We're also getting into the international market in Chile and in Mexico and Colombia. We have, as you can see on the slides, quite a few hospitals and clinics and outpatient centers. We've implemented microsegmentation, which we'll talk about more. I'm responsible for the technical architecture for our compute, networking, storage, and solutions.
Cool. And then last but not least, Jeff.
So I'm Jeff Willington. I'm a technical product manager with VMware for the NSX product. Doing some fill-in duty for a customer that wasn't able to make it out. But I've spent about a year of my core SE life supporting healthcare customers in Illinois, all large hospital systems within Illinois. Transitioned to the networking and security business unit to support customers across 8 states, including Mike Lonzi when he was part of the Epic system. And then moved into a technical product manager role within VMware here shortly. So not necessarily still focusing on healthcare, but healthcare is still a passion of mine. Still love talking about it.
So we'll get started, and if we don't participate in the audience, Jeff's actually going to start reading chapters out of the book. So we're going to try to entice you a little bit here. Just pick a chapter. Which one? What do you want?
It was a dark and stormy night. That's how I all start.
All right. So, I want to definitely keep it interactive between the crowd and everybody and the panelists up here. Going to go through some standard questions. Hopefully, will help. But the idea here is to, if you started or are looking to start implementing NSX, what can you learn from folks who've actually done it before? What things can you avoid? What worked well? What didn't? Those are the type of things we want to get across. And then, obviously, what were some of those reasons? Which we'll ask Brandon. So what were some of the reasons of adopting NSX within your environment?
Yeah, so for us, our biggest driver was an internal audit of our data center security. Obviously most people here have we have your DMZ firewalls, your edge firewalls, and you're keeping people out. But obviously, there's a probably a bigger threat internal to your data centers. And so we were kind of behind in that regard. And so we were 95+% virtualized already. So NSX, made a lot of sense to microsegment our data center environments. So now we're reaching out to more, trying to get it more involved in our regional data centers, as well as we've actually implemented in our DMZ. We have a virtual DMZ. But the main driver was around audit and just increased internal data center security.
Nick, how about you?
Yeah, it's a lot of the same stuff. We wanted to add the additional layer of security, in the data center. We also use some of the stretch layer 2 stuff too. So for disaster recovery, that sort of stuff. Helps with the automation. Like we don't have to go check out IP addresses or whatever anymore. Like we kind of handle our own IPs with the BRA and some of that. But definitely the microsegmenting of the Epic, protecting that system and protecting the data that comes out of it.
So what were some of the challenges that you guys ran into when you were implementing NSX, either organizationally or technically? Or is there a big adjustment from within the teams and the structures both within your organizations?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, networking was a little bit hesitant at first. We had professional services come in and sort of was able to talk networking with the networking people and kind of get an idea that it isn't a scary thing. We and the systems team kind of take ownership of the firewalls, because the way I think about it is we offer this service and it's on the VM anyway. So networking team, hey, you guys really don't care if I lock down my machine and screw it up or whatever is what they're they don't want the call, that sort of thing. So we kind of took that on and are driving that. InfoSec kind of loves it, but they want me to go faster, that sort of thing.
Why can't you go any faster?
I know, yeah. My boss is over here is like, yeah, why don't you go faster, buddy? Can you automate all this? Yeah.
I mean, you were just telling me the other day you could do it in your sleep, so.
I do it in my sleep, well, most of the time. Yeah.
That's the only way to meet your timelines, right?
Yeah, right.
24/7.
I'm really busy, yeah.
Yeah, so in our case, probably our biggest challenge strictly with microsegmentation is just, we're systems people. We're not necessarily, well, in our team's, case, we're not application, we're not using supporting directly the application, we're supporting the infrastructure that runs the application. So in our case, it was just the time required to, go discover all these interactions, between applications and users and systems. So for us, it was just the time needed. So what we did is we created a kind of a tiger team with the help of a PSO engagement, and just had a small group of people from our server team, our network team. Security team was involved, but more from just an oversight, and yes, we approve of what you're doing and thank you for doing it. But the server team and the network team really dug in to do this reconnaissance work, right? We've got to find out who's talking to who and what's the best way to create these policies. And so one thing one of the biggest things that I'm hearing this year at VMworld is there's tools out there that VMware offers that we are using now, but some of the things I'm hearing I think we'll be able to use to, ramp up that rate of application, policy creation, right? So things like vRealize Network Insight, which we are a customer for, as well as some of the things that may be coming in NSX. So if you're a current NSX customer and you're going through the same troubles with just the pace of how you're microsegmenting your environment, check with your VMware person and see if you can get some roadmap, because I think there's some exciting things on the horizon that will help you speed that up. I mean, in our case, we used Log Insight for 90%, right? Mm-hmm. Create a rule, allow the traffic, log it, and let's see what comes out of it, and then create your policy. So and that works great, but it's time consuming. So
yeah.
Probably just the time needed was our biggest challenge.
Yeah, because that's a pretty good point. Like the old school way to how do you know what flows your traffic, what traffic you need to allow or deny. The old school is, hey, ask the vendor, or go ask the application owner. Of course, they don't know. Then you got to go find it all out. But the tools do help quite a bit. So then you turn that around and you're like, well, you know it well enough because you see it all the time. You kind of tell them, what they need. You tell the vendor what flows you need to allow. You tell the application owner what they need to allow, because you will learn a lot when you start this out. You'll learn a ton.
Yeah, I would say as I've had discussions with customers specifically around where do I start, right, is usually the first question. How do I even get possibly, what application do I start with? And from that point, it's leveraging the right tool for the right job, right? We all started with Log Insight. It was kind of the first place to kind of start locking down flows and start understanding how applications actually function within the environment. And then as we've started having more and more discussions with our customers, we've started to build other tools, like we made the acquisition with Arkin for VRNI, and then we've made other types of strides in things like Application Rule Manager, which not a lot of people really even know about. It's something that's pretty new. It's as of NSX 6.3, but these kind of things that these not necessarily trouble, but just the challenges of kind of having to do these things kind of in a manual process, and then how do you do things at scale is something that VMware is very much aware of. And so we've been trying to build tools that make that day two process get even faster for our customers, kind of to give us a place to start and move forward.
So both of you work with fairly large systems and large EMRs with a lot of different virtual servers. Did you just enable all the firewalls all at once? I know, Brandon, you said you didn't, but did you just put it all in a bucket and click go, or how'd that work out for you guys?
Yeah, so at least for the Epic stuff, there's the different chunks of applications, like your hyperspace web, you have your print, you have your interconnect and all that stuff. I tackled each one of those, at a time. So communicating with the relevant people who know about those systems, and then, okay, look, lock one of those things down at a time, and by the end of it, I ate that elephant one bite at a time. Mm-hmm. Just so you're like, oh yeah, I locked down Epic. By the way, nothing works, that sort of thing. So get the sections, so like, oh, printing's not working so well. Okay, let's take a look at the rules and do some allows on that.
Yeah, so I'm just curious. We're a Meditech client server. That's our EMR. Is there anyone here running Meditech? Okay, cool.
Both. What's the other one? You said you run both.
Yeah, Epic and Meditech.
Okay.
Yeah. Anybody Epic customers? Epic. Yeah. All right. Yeah.
Show off.
I feel you. Yeah.
So ours was as Nick described, very iterative, right? So luckily we kind of the server engineering team is kind of tier 3 support for Meditech, because it's so reliant upon the performance of the hardware or virtualization in this case. So we know Meditech very well in our environment, and so we kind of already knew who was talking to who, just from past troubleshooting and the way that we have our system architected. So we were able to really quickly dump VMs into security groups and then create allow and log rules between security groups, just to validate what we thought, and then we found out some new things, right? Yeah. But yes, it was let's tackle this piece of Meditech. Let's create an allow and log rule and see what's happening for a month, because it's our biggest application, and we don't want to miss a month-in cycle where new things might pop off, or we probably went 6 weeks before we applied any kind of denies. Yeah. So what we did, our engagement was a few months, 16 weeks. So what we did is we knew Meditech, we wanted to look at it for the longest amount of time before we went and did applied any block rules. So we focused on getting its reconnaissance rules set up, from the start. And it was the easiest, because like I said, we kind of knew probably who would be talking to who. And so that gave us time to set those, let them gather data, and then start working on, other applications. Yeah. yeah, that's kind of.
Did you find the first time you put that block in production, you kind of
Yeah.
stomach a little bit? Like the first time you block hyperspace web, it's like, you know what, I'm going to get a lot of calls.
Yeah.
Like, if you double, triple check, it's a whole lot of nothing. It's kind of nice.
So maybe just a tip there is, and I think we talked about this before the session. What we did is when we create we created our first deny, which would disallow other servers and users to talk to Meditech servers unless they were coming in on a port that we allowed. We would log obviously the block rule in Log Insight. And so there's a way in Log Insight where you can set a threshold to where if you see more than 10 block events in say 5 minutes, send me an email. So we had that ramped down to like 5 events per 10 minutes right when we went live with the rule. That way, very quickly, if we had a problem, we would know before the user would start reporting it, right? And there was a couple times where we said, oh yeah, what's that coming from? That was completely new, but we knew right away because we were getting the email alerts. And then as time went on and we were, more sure about the policy creation, we were able to increase that threshold just to kind of reduce the noise. So if you're using, Log Insight is actually, if you buy NSX, you get Log Insight now. So very, good tool to use for that sort of thing.
So I think where we've kind of made some strides in that, for customers that are going down this path now, right? Things like the application rule manager and newer things kind of in VRNI 3.5 is the ability to pull that IP fix information from the distributed firewall. That information that's going to show us, whether or not a flow within the system is protected by an NSX-based rule or is not protected by an NSX-based rule or is actually being dropped, right? So it was we got to go through and create an alert, right, to find, anything that might possibly be dropped. But now we have tools where you can actually go through and take a look at the flows and see the actual rule that's actually being the one that's dropping the packet. So now you can go in and actually recreate the rule very, very quickly. So that's not impacting things nearly as long as it possibly would.
First question, awesome.
Yeah, so 2 questions. First one is, how long did you have to do reconnaissance on the flows? Was 30 days sufficient? Did you have to go 2 months? And then the second question is, are you starting to do intra-applications, so Meditech to PAC systems or other systems, and where are you in that stage?
Yeah, so let me tell you my process a little bit. So we're lucky enough to have VRNI, and so what that does is have a pretty good database of those flows over time. So that gets me about 90% on my rules. And so what I do is I'll have, make the groups and apply my core rules. So like my Active Directory, my antivirus, like WhatsUp Gold, whatever, gets the core. And so that kind of filters out some of the noise, like your AD traffic and all that kind of stuff. But then you see, like, okay, like for Epic, you're an Epic guy. Some of the stuff isn't, it's not all that much, So, but it was, so Log Insight, or not Log Insight, but VRNI does have quite a bit of time. And then what I would do is Log Insight, like you're saying, to double, triple check that I've got everything pretty well.
Yeah, so to your first question, it just kind of depended on the app, right? If it's a business application, like a revenue cycle application where there's probably going to be some weekly, monthly, every 6 months and yearly jobs, then we would gather the data for longer. So Meditech, like I said, we did 6 months. Active Directory, we did for a week, right? Because it's there's not a lot of monthly, at least in our opinion, there wasn't, and we didn't see any. Right?
You find that chart pretty quick.
Yeah, so it just kind of depended on the application. It's unique to each application. And then kind of we're going to be talking about this afterwards because I'm very interested in the way Nick used Verni for his rule creation. We were about opposite. We were 90% Log Insight and then kind of 10% VRNI to kind of validate what we were, just to make sure that yes, that's the right grouping. We're not seeing a lot of other flows that are hitting the rule that we need to create a new one for. So back to accelerating the policy creation, we're going to start trying to lean more heavily on VRNI for that.
And you will miss stuff. You will miss stuff. Like I missed an end of the statements. I missed that to the print shop or something once. But
did you need the 6 months for Meditech, or was 2 months sufficient? I was just curious.
So the question was, did he need the 6 months for Meditech?
Well, it was 6 weeks. 6 weeks, yeah. We just wanted to make it through one end of the month cycle, right?
Okay.
So we did it in March, so we'll see. Well, actually, no, we've had our end of fiscal in the June, so, and we didn't have any problems. But we had the alerts still set up, so if it would have hit, we would have found out before and adjusted the rule before anybody probably noticed.
So with using the tool sets like VRNI, did you find anything squirrely or interesting within your environments that?
I mean, yeah, you start looking at this traffic, and it's easy to get sidetracked. What's this? Why is this guy talking to people and all this? I'm like, oh, that's this. And we did. We called a meeting together and like, hey, are you guys sure you should be, talking to this guy? Because you will start to see, what's expected traffic, what's not expected. And then you're like, oh, okay, that's okay. Or, oh, no, that's not okay. We need to shut that guy down. Oh, yeah, we did see some VRNI is very good about helping you see that stuff, too.
Yeah, so we found some things. I probably can't discuss some of them in public, but nothing bad.
World of Warcraft servers on, whatever, that sort of thing.
A couple of the interesting things we found was we found a domain controller that wasn't set up correctly in DNS, so it wasn't actually, responding the correct way. So that was one thing that really, kind of helped the environment, just that we probably would have never found until it got, life cycled. Another thing was we're a Microsoft Skype. We use that for our instant messaging, and we also locked during this microseg engagement. We also locked down our Citrix Zen desktop environment to where one VDI couldn't talk to another VDI, right? Because that's a big, if you get one VDI infected and it can, talk to every other VDI, you're in trouble. So that was a very easy win, one rule or one policy. But what we found is that Skype actually uses some, you think it's all client server, right? The client types a message, it goes to the Skype server, and then it goes to whoever they're trying to talk to. Well, in some cases, if you share a file, or if you in some instances, you make a direct call, like a voice call, it will do client to client. So Microsoft, in their wisdom, sets a range of ports that traffic can happen on, which is 1025 through 65,000. So
I hate those ones. I hate these.
Yeah, they gave us. We were able to lock down a few of them right up. 0 through 1024 or 1 through 1024 were okay. So that we were able to. Actually, we haven't implemented this yet, but we're working on. There's a way to scope down that range of ports that is used for that communication. But we didn't know that was actually happening. So it's a couple examples.
So when you ran into stuff like that, and when you're going through your environment and locking it down, you both were using Log Insight. Did you enable some of the end users or application owners to see Log Insight? That way, when you're clicking block on Zen desktop, the guys in that room don't just come running to you and they're like, "Oh, you broke everything."
Yeah, we were looking at that. So, really the question is, how do you communicate to your end user who you've locked down their stuff, the application owners and that sort of thing? How do you say, like, oh, I just locked you down and you're in a box, and hopefully I got that box right, so if you see problems, let me know. What is a good way to communicate that? I came up with a PowerPoint sheet, but I think, I've been here and, I can log Insight, put a dashboard up, and here you go. And so we're looking at those things, or VRNI. Hey, look, some of the new stuff that's coming out, I guess. Should be able to just kind of type in your workload and see. Like we had the one this morning, it's like, hey, Nick, you lock me down to NSX? I'm like, no, you have a DNS problem. Come on, Ron, knock it off. Right, so anyway, I can't ping the name. You got a DNS problem. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so for us, we did not give Log Insight access or any dashboard access to any of the application people. But what we did do is we got them involved, very early. One, to lean on them for any knowledge they had around ports and interactions, working with them and the vendor of whatever application we were trying to microseg. But we kind of would do a pre-meeting to say, just to educate them about what we're trying to do, right?
Mm-hmm.
We didn't want NSX to become a 4-letter word. That was kind of our little mantra, right? So we would educate them on, hey, we're doing this. We're going to spend a lot of time figuring out who your servers are talking to and who are talking to them. The plan is to not have any outage, but we'll vastly increase our security. And for the most part, everybody, they would have to sign off. Our change control process, they would be in the CAB meeting that, to sign off on, yes, we're okay with the infrastructure team applying these rules. Security would sign off as well. So I think, if you can proactively educate your users and your application owners on what you're doing, it goes a long way in them trusting that you know what you're doing.
Yeah.
Another question.
So can you speak a little bit about, by the way, I attended another session where they were talking about automation inside NSX. Can you speak a little bit about the importance of naming conventions, convincing those rogue admins that those naming conventions should be followed in terms of those policies and rules that you put in NSX?
Yeah, that's an awesome question. So I went over to our networking team, like what would you guys, in a perfect world, what would you guys name your firewall rules, and it comes down to how you troubleshoot this stuff. So if a regular person looks at this thing, would they be able to troubleshoot it? And like, oh yeah, I see here you're doing this port, you're blocking this, to make it, not like super long, like you're writing a paragraph in your name convention, all that, but definitely have standards. So with that in mind, like you name your security groups, something with a suffix or whatever, just so maybe programming later that would all fit. So like when you do an export, then Excel, they can sort by all this kind of stuff. You got to think about that. Yeah, naming convention's huge.
Are you talking more about on the server side or VM, naming VMs?
All of the above.
Okay.
Because, when you start to develop those policies that are looking for pieces of names of VMs or tags or things like that,
Oh, you're even talking about the naming convention for your VMs.
Yeah.
Oh,
everything.
Man, yeah.
If they're based on names,
Yep.
or if they're based on the names of the tags, and then you have an administrator who creates a tag that is sort of like the naming convention.
Yeah.
From a human standpoint, it is the same, but
Get that worked out. Get your boss and your boss's boss to get a good naming convention and have everybody stick to it. Absolutely.
I'd say actually when we were working on Epic Hosting, the worst conversation and the longest conversation I had was about naming convention. It felt like it was a month-long fight, right? But in the end, it worked out. So figuring out a naming convention and sticking to it, and the idea we kind of worked off of was like, anybody should be able to walk in and look at like a VM or a rule or a name of anything and essentially know what it is, right? And that went into a lot of the way we lock things down. So every type of a print server, it had something that represented that in the name, obviously with a nice number at the end.
Have something. So like even if like you have a major outage or something, just NSX whatever. Yeah. Like, oh, hey, which ones do I want to pull up? Because I'm just some guy. Well, if it says production and it says Epic, let's get it up and run it now. Mm-hmm. If it says test and it says any test, it's not coming up. And because I'm limited resource, have that.
And like it came from another side that they name things after like token books or characters. That
World of Warcraft characters.
But I don't know like who should talk to who in that world. So naming it, that role. So I'm curious. Actually, a question for everybody is: how many of you have naming conventions and like it's strict adherence to that? And is that part of your change control? Right. So
yeah, good. I love you guys. Yeah.
Yeah, at Christus, luckily
go for it.
Well, I would just say we had a pretty strict server naming convention already. So if and the server team would actually, we're not as automated yet as we should be, so they're the ones who build the servers, right? So people are stuck with our naming convention, right? And it's fine, it works well. Yeah. On the rule and tagging side, yes, I agree with you. It's strictly for your sanity when you're trying to troubleshoot something, right? You can, and really with VRNI, I found, I don't know if Nick agrees, but I found that it's much easier to look at rules and what servers in what group and what tag and what firewall rules applied. Much easier to do that in VRNI than it is to go hunt through in the NSX vCenter interface. So.
All right, thanks. We're going to be doing this soon, and I just want to make a comment that everybody's talking about how difficult it is to map out who's talking to who, right, and implementing NSX. So to me, that speaks to a kind of a maybe not mature enough onboarding process for applications and developing a document that overviews the architecture at a logical level of an application. So while we're doing this, we're going to assemble a team to walk away with that. So when 5 years from now NSX isn't cutting it, we got to do the next thing, whatever it is, we don't have to do maybe as much analysis. But that's just a comment. My first question is, are you guys implementing, like we're going to be doing Panorama with Palo Alto, like the tying together of NSX with their firewall? Just thoughts on that?
That's on the roadmap for us, yeah. I mean, we're in talks with that. It isn't in place right now, but we are in talks with that. I would say definitely don't wait for that. If you're going to do microsegmentation, start out small. Here, get your base, layer that in, because you will learn a ton, about your application, about your network. You'll be the most knowledgeable guy about your network. The networking team will have can't hold a candle to you after you look at these flows all the time. So yeah, you will learn a ton. So don't wait.
Yeah, we're currently not looking at a service insertion firewall partner, but we do use, I don't know if it'll come up later, but we do use Trend Micro Deep Security for anti-malware. So by the end of the calendar year, the goal is to have all of our data center VMs moved off of our legacy antivirus vendor and being protected by host-based anti-malware with Trend Micro Deep Security. So kind of similar, the whole service insertion thing, guest introspection. But so far, right now we have over 5,000 VMs that are protected in that way. So no agent on a VDI, don't have to worry about managing that. Don't have to worry about someone getting in and disabling the antivirus because there's no agent on the box. So we've been really successful with that part of it.
And to speak to the point around creating those architecture diagrams and those flows, some vendors have it and some don't. So this is something I worked with as Jeff when I was his customer with another former coworker of mine, Paul Parmentier, who's not here today. But we created this map and these flows, and that's actually what's become the heart of care system security, is being able to do that in a repeatable fashion. So one, if there are other, this is what we want to do, why we worked with Brandon and his team at Meditech, with Meditech. And there are other areas we want to expand that to. So I'd be happy to talk to you afterwards. Are there other applications that you think would be interesting? It's something that within my group, and I know Jeff loves this stuff, even though he's now. So I get to do all the work now instead of Jeff.
So to tie into your question on the Panorama side of things and Palo Alto side of things. So when I first actually joined VMware, one of my first customers was a healthcare organization that was purchasing NSX and Palo Alto integration specifically to secure their CareFusion application. That was their specific example. That was their specific use case that they wanted. They wanted to deep packet and inspect all traffic that was going in and out of the prescription delivery system, and that's the use case for that, right? So the NSX firewall is a layer 2 through layer 4, right? So it's only a port protocol type of perspective, but to tear into HTTPS types of protocols, they would need kind of that service insertion. So from an east-west perspective, that's specifically what they bought that for. Now with the service insertion pieces, right? A lot of customers they want to do those types of things, but it's the fact that you have to have a virtual machine on every one of your hosts as it sits right now from an NSX perspective. So a lot of our customers are building secure enclaves where they want a layer 7, a deeper level of security for those specific systems, and then they're placing the Palo Alto VMs on those clusters, and then that's where they kind of put those types of applications. And then the nice thing is that you only have to filter the traffic that you want, obviously through the layer 7 engine and so forth, kind of along those lines.
Yep. And where I've seen Palo Alto is especially, it's a lot in the DMZ, right? More traditional DMZ, not the DMZ anywhere approach with NSX. It can be used there as well, but that traditional DMZ where maybe you have a border firewall and a border IPS, right? Everything coming in, but now you still have potentially web servers talking inside to your internal network. So now it's another layer. It's a common thing that I've seen when going out and working and talking with customers.
And onto the comment, onto your comment about the documentation, right, and process, right, and the application owners and understanding flows and kind of, those are some of the things that I go through. Kind of what I wrote a lot about, right, was that you know, what's that? Template? Actually, you could use some of the stuff that's actually in there for it to kind of build out a template. But what I specifically had it in there for was, you know, I used to be a customer, right? So I've kind of lived in this world of having to do disaster recovery and all these types of things. So documentation has always been kind of a chore, if you will. But going down the path of doing the microsegmentation piece, if you actually if you actually do a mock-up of what your firewall rules will look like, you know, prior to actually implementing them, the nice thing is that when you're done, you're left with a document, right, that you could put into your run book for your disaster recovery site, so that, you know, when you go to implement your security in DR, here's what I worked with the application owners, and they know that when this application goes into the environment, that these are the rules that are actually in place for them, so that if there's something wrong, they could talk with their application vendor and say, here's what we're doing from a security standpoint, is there something amiss?
Yep. So you talked a little bit about antivirus there, Brandon. How long have you been using antivirus within what, you know, so is it just VDI? Are you using it on servers, and then did you use something,
Yeah.
you know, were you using InGuest on your servers before, or?
Yeah, so
Or don't answer if you have.
No, actually, when we bought NSX over like 18 months ago, something like that, we thought, you know, we were going to hit microsegmentation hard, right? We were going to, you know, install it, start creating rules. Well, we didn't we weren't prepared. We didn't have all of our VMs yet in our vCenter 6 environment. So, you know, very quickly, if you don't, you know, it's vCenter centric to some extent. So the first actual thing that we were able to do was the Trend Micro Deep Security. That was actually ended up being our first production coverage with NSX. And so yeah, we've been using it for going on a year now, and it's all of our Meditech servers are protected by it. Most, I think we have maybe 1,000 server VMs left, and part of that is just churning through and, you know, uninstalling the old one and waiting for the next, you know, maintenance window to reboot to get that out of the shim out of the system. And but yeah, we're hoping to be done by the end of the year.
Cool.
So
Nice. Another question?
Yeah, my question is specific to DMZ Anywhere, and I was wondering if any of you guys have taken your DMZ and put it on your production hardware that you run everything else on, and got rid of those few isolated hardware hosts that you have separated. It's always separate. And if you did, is there any HIPAA ramifications to the physical separation that you had any issues with?
Yeah, so we have not yet. I mean, that's a fight we're having with networking and security, I imagine, or coming up, if they're watching this, right? But we have not just yet.
no cameras, right?
Yeah, no, there's no cameras.
That's right. Yeah, we've already hit them with them, like, hey, I think this is a good idea.
In our case, we are still separate hardware. We're a Cisco UCS customer, so we have a separate UCS Mini that we're using for our virtual DMZ. So we're kind of hybrid in our DMZ design, right? We still have classic, you know, physical firewalls, you know, policing in and out of the DMZ, but internal to the DMZ, right? Previously, you'd have, you know, PV-LANs and all these things to keep servers from talking to each other and hairpinning the traffic to the firewall for, you know, one DMZ if they needed to talk to another DMZ server. So we used microsegmentation to handle the internal DMZ communication, but we're still using our physical. So we haven't got a lot of pushback because we didn't have, I mean, we had the internal DMZ stuff before, but it was much harder to create and you know, oh, you need another server? Well, and it can't talk to anybody else? Okay, we're going to need a new DMZ VLAN. So it's not on our like priority list right now. We don't have a big DMZ. We have maybe, you know, 30 servers, so it's not a priority.
Thank you.
So one of the things in regards to HIPAA, you're actually not going to run anything with DMZ anywhere with HIPAA, but you will with PCI. So if you have PCI in your environment, and if you have today DMZ that's part of that credit card data environment, you do need a stateful firewall between services. So NSX can actually fit that bill. I went through these audits and they're really fun. So if you haven't, I recommend it. Actually, it's kind of necessary if you want to get PCI certification, but you can use NSX to do that. You just have to, and it's great because you can actually use the distributed firewall screen as documenting your flows, and you walk through that with your auditor. Again, really exciting stuff, but it can be done. In my environment that we operated, we were traditional DMZ as well, but we still used NSX to get our PCI certification.
Yeah, so I have a customer that's done that specifically around PCI compliance, right? So their MyChart servers take PCI data from their DMZ environment, right? So I've had lots of conversations with customers around the systems that sit within the DMZ from the EMR perspective, right, and how those systems, as they reach out to external applications or things along those lines, the PHI and PII data that goes in and out of those systems. So what VMware is doing a lot more of is we have a compliance and risk team that's been educating a lot of the auditing community, specifically around what NSX can do and how it actually can fulfill those kinds of regulatory requirements, so that it becomes less of I have to go through that whole process and you have to continue to educate the auditors, right? Because it's typically there's the letter of the law, but then there's also at the auditor's discretion a lot of times, right? So on whether or not they feel that you've fulfilled it. So a lot of what we're doing from a healthcare perspective is doing a lot of education with the auditing communities, so that they have an idea of what we can do and where those types of things work.
And that's key. The first time we went through that with NSX, and the auditors are used to traditional firewalls without a GUI, so it's magical and new, right? It's explaining, it's actually a firewall. Where does it live? Everywhere. I don't get it. So it's awesome.
Can you show me the piece of hardware?
Yeah. What challenges did you guys run into within the tool, not just with NSX, but the tool sets? And then, feel free to share and ask Jeff to make some enhancements to some products here. Let's put them on the spot.
I think for us, like getting my process down, so like getting everything there, getting my process. I mean, like when I first started out, I really have to stare at the ceiling for about 30, 40 minutes. My boss is right there, and he's hear me say this, right? But just to kind of get my mindset, into firewall rules, not servers, not troubleshooting, not whatever, right? But then kind of quickly came up with more of a mnemonic, here's your template, right? So this is how you're going to build your rules. So start with step one. Okay, that's easy. You start getting in the flow. You start building. That was kind of a challenge, honestly. Time is another challenge, because it's not a multitask sort of operation. So when you sit down and you're going to build this firewall, and maybe another one's like guts. Here, I'm going to block you now. The change management's in. You're ready to go, and you hope you got it all right.
So you can block his email, right? So
right.
You can do that. Just put him in a group.
Put him in a group.
Yeah, so we had similar challenges, right, with just getting a dedicated resource. And I mean, I don't want to make it sound like it's so hard that, I know you're not saying that, but it does take concentration, right? You can't be on a phone call, multitasking, checking email, and writing, rules. I mean, that's, probably for any firewall rule, whether it's NSX or not, right? So in our case, we had a big ask, do Meditech, do Active Directory, do imaging system. And so like I said earlier, we created a Tiger team, and we were able to luckily have enough staff to backfill some of their normal day-to-day duties, so that they could concentrate and focus on this. And that was just a managerial decision, right? Can I afford, this is priority one, so I'm going to, lend some of my guys to the project for an extended period of time to get this done. From a tool perspective, we had a few challenges with some squirrely TCP retransmit or TCP flag issues. But we opened a GSS case, and they had seen it before, and they were able to help us. So yeah, our biggest challenge was getting NSX upgraded, right? So we were running the 6.2.3 version, which probably I shouldn't even say 6.2.3. It's the version that shall remain nameless.
I'm pretty sure you meant 64.
Yeah.
The version that shall remain nameless.
So before we did microseg, we were on 6.2.3. So kind of at the beginning of our engagement, we were not creating any block rules right away because we were still on 6.2.3. So we had to go through the iterative process of updating, almost 300 hosts to the new version of NSX. So obviously now with 6.3, it's a little bit easier because you don't have to reboot the host. You can just put it in maintenance mode, upgrade it, take it out of maintenance mode. So that saves you, for us, that's half the time, right? The physical hardware reboot.
The directions are really good for the upgrade, though. I want to get a shout out to whoever wrote those directions for the NSX upgrade.
Oh yeah.
I wish I could take credit for that. But
Those are awesome, right? So sometimes you go to the VMware, KB, it's all text, it's whatever.
Yeah.
These have pictures. This is great. So whoever did that, thank you. That's awesome.
Yes, I agree.
So Jeff, we'll flip over to a question here.
This is specifically for the group here. We're sort of in the forefront of healthcare at NSX. And as more applications are identified, it's almost like a community of applications that are very specific to healthcare. So if you look 18 months out, 24 months out, what would be a good way to share the blueprints, right, in groups that you created for your apps? Do you have any ideas? And if you can predict, hey, this is a great way to consume this, whether it's a community or is it VMware, or do you want to have healthcare organizations create that content?
I think it's a very unique challenge, right? When we've talked to other vendors, I'm not going to name names, but they don't want those flows really publicly available because it essentially gives someone a way to attack or what to look for. So that's the challenge. I don't have a good answer for that. I think part of it, what we've done internally at VMware, is build these blueprints, and then we don't publish them.
Correct.
So we have a collective of them, and that's where I'd like to continue to take things, is create this collective, work with vendors, work with customers, build that out, but still maintain it as private, so it's not there for anyone to go and look at and use to their advantage.
Yeah, I think from day two operations perspective, right, that if you talk with our services organizations, had a similar question, what they develop, templating models for Exchange and Skype and other, SAP applications and things like that, right? So, it was the same kind of concept we did when we did EMRs, right? It's the same thing that, we'd like to do from the Meditech side of things as well. And we'd love to have, these blueprints so we could share with customers. And I would love to put those things out as flings, right? And be able to, share them out with the community. But the issue is that, while I would love to be able to do that, right, you have to take vendors into consideration on whether or not that they're going to allow those types of things to actually happen. It's intellectual property kind of on both sides of the house, right? If in terms of how architecture is built and so forth. But we're just going to continue to do as much as we can to simplify day two operations as much as possible. And I think from the blueprints that we've built. Things that, when Mike and I sat down and wrote, the stuff for the Epic blueprint, for the care system security piece, I think we've invested probably well more than 250, 300 hours just of our time just building those things out, right? So, but the benefit is for our customers that don't have to worry about doing that, right? We're doing all that work up front. We're working with the vendors to kind of make sure that those things are done for you. And then the things that are customer-specific types of considerations, we work with the customers to basically, finish out the things that are specific for your organization. And it takes that time frame of having to kind of do these things. So it's not like these applications are insecure. It's just that if you want a least privilege, network least privilege type of security model, those vendors are they're not playing in that space, right? They're building an application, so it's up to us to kind of take those security things on our shoulders to kind of build those templates for. So day two operations, we're all about making sure that, we get as much done as possible. So I think from all the time invested, we're now able to, kind of do things within a matter of days, get things in place and then get the initial kind of build processes done in a very, very short amount of time. And that, we started with the EMRs because those are the ones that are nearest and dearest to all healthcare organizations, right? They're the #1 business critical application, right? So, we go from there to other things like integration engines and PAC systems and things like that, right? These other larger systems.
But don't miss the opportunity to, go through the exercise to get to know your network, get to know your people, get to know the app owners a little bit better, It's really nice. I just broke your application. Hey, let's go have coffee or something, whatever. Don't miss that opportunity, I think, is what I would say. It's like, oh yeah, we got all these templates, we're accelerating this thing, that's great. But don't miss that opportunity to cross those silos and to get to know the teams a little bit better.
Yeah, I think if I was ever anyone's SE in the room and we ever did proof of concepts or we ever did kind of how we're going to lay a lot of these things out, Kim, that I refused to work with customers that would not have everyone in the room. Right, that everybody had a stake in the game. Right, I needed the Epic, the Meditech folks in the room. I needed the networking and security folks in the room. I needed everybody to basically be in the room because that was what I could do to kind of, personally try to help bring the organization to kind of understand that we're thinking about this thing from a holistic view and not just that's your problem or this is your problem type of scenario. Right, so that everybody kind of understands what's going on and with the process.
Yep.
Oh, he got the
First of all, are your internal security teams at all involved with NSX? And if so, how are they involved? And secondly, we're an Epic shop, so I'm curious if you're using those Epic templates with regards to locking down like cache. If you've used them, how much tweaking they needed. I know there are a few customers, right, Mike, that may be using those in production, and we've been looking at those, so I'm just curious on the use of those.
Yeah, #1, I like the accent. That's great. Okay, I love the accent. Anyway, yeah, InfoSec is involved. We try to keep them up to date on what we're doing. They're gassed about it. They really do like it. I think they're a little bit jealous, of, hey, we're putting these things on that you guys have always wanted to do. But I definitely invite those guys if they want to look at the rules, or I did consult them, like, them and the networking team, like, how would you build these things? Sure. Oh yeah, they're involved as much as they want to be. Yeah.
And so did you use the templates?
Oh yeah, I made the templates. Yeah. Jeff and I, we made them. Whatever. I kid, but yeah, I mean, really, we didn't use the templates. We kind of worked through. Jeff, you obviously came on site. And
Nick and Jeff. I mean, these guys were definitely very helpful in helping us validate a lot of the things that we were trying to accomplish for our customers, right? So they were the organization that we wanted to sit down with us and actually help that process. And I'm the same thing with Christus from the Meditech side of the house too, right? It's getting a customer that is that wants to do this process, that wants to sit down and actually help us kind of help other folks as well. And yeah, I mean, that was super. Those were great partnerships and so forth. So we really appreciate those efforts.
I think actually Nick and the folks at their hospital were the first people to use those templates. So yeah, getting that off the ground, it's always good to find someone who wants to partner with you and work through those, because the first time you go through anything, you're going to find something new and unique, and you need to shift and adjust.
Hi, you touched on this earlier, Brandon. I think about. You weren't ready at the beginning because it was VMware centric, 6.0 I believe. Mm-hmm. Hindsight being what it is, are there any other things like prerequisites or something that you wish you had done differently before you began? I mean, the planning and all that stuff is part of it, but is there anything that if you could do it over again you would change?
That's a good question. Our biggest challenge was the fact that it wasn't really we weren't ready. It was more just a plan. The way that the planning when we were going to have to do the engagement for other reasons, and the state of our environment. We were in the middle of the vCenter 5.5, ESXi 5.1, forklift move over to new hardware on vCenter 6, ESXi 6, right? So from a timing perspective, it just didn't make sense. Now, it wasn't a waste because we learned some other things, like we created the process around how we were going to do the application security reconnaissance, right? So we were able to get that done. And then, it kind of lit a charge to go in, okay, let's get these hosts and vCenter and everything upgraded and moved and ready so that we can restart. So we had a very quick engagement at the beginning to kind of just initially install NSX and get it on the network, and so we could use it. We had done a POC and we have a lab, but this was the first engagement we did was a short engagement just to get it running. I can't really say, we kind of did all the best practices, right? There's not really a written, I don't think, best practices on this is how you do your NSX engagement, but we involved the security team, we involved the network team, we kind of had, like you said, we let Meditech know we were doing it, we asked for their input, we got everybody involved, and then really just came down to start looking at the data and
doing the work, turning the knobs,
And I'll say, you can install for microseg. We haven't really talked about, I know Nick's doing it now. We haven't really talked about VXLAN or load balancing or all the other features that NSX provides. But microseg is, you could start microsegging in a lab in a couple days. It's not deploy NSX
You don't need
manager.
to know networking. You don't need
any. You don't have to deploy any controllers. You can just do NSX manager, pair it with your vCenter, and get login site. I would recommend login site.
Blow up your lab.
And start looking at the data. So it's for microseg, to me it's much easier than to implement than the VXLAN stuff.
We definitely had PSO come help us with the VXLAN stuff.
Yeah, so we're coming close to the top of the hour here. So you talked a little bit about what's kind of the feature for you. So you're using antivirus, you're using distributed firewall now. Are you looking into other use cases and leveraging other pieces of NSX?
Absolutely. So our next kind of phase for NSX is based on disaster recovery. So right now we have 2 main data centers in San Antonio, and we're doing kind of active passive, right? We're using SRM and EMC recover point and to replicate our data, and we're using then SRM to bring that environment up. But right now we have to change IP addresses. So our big use case for VXLAN is to extend it and be able to just have SRM bring up the VM. It's on the same IP address, and what that saves us is we have in our hospitals, we have bedside monitors and lab equipment that are hard-coded to talk, they're old equipment, and they're hard-coded to talk to the IP of the server as they know it, right? So if I go and change the IP of the server in a DR situation, then I'm going to have to send somebody to all these hospitals to manually get on the device and update the target where it's supposed to go.
Yeah,
so,
EICU cameras.
Exactly. Yep. So that's kind of our next big phase.
That's my favorite thing about healthcare is hard-coded IPs.
Yeah,
that's good.
They're everywhere.
Love it. Yeah.
Modalities, all those kinds of things.
Yeah.
How about you, Nick? Any expansions in your other use cases that you see on the horizon?
I think more automation is where we're going next. Just continue to microseg. We've got the more DevOps, so we're looking at doing that, but it gets involved with the what's called the automation. Like, hey, let's get the workload spun up in its own little network and that sort of thing is kind of our next project to kind of help the DBAs be more productive. Cool.
So any other questions from the audience? So first of all, thank you guys. You've been great. Thank you for asking questions. Participation's been awesome.
Yeah, thank you.
Any other questions? We've got about a minute left. If you have one, great. If you want to talk to us afterwards, we'll be here for a little bit. But thank you guys for attending, and hope you have a great rest of your VMworld.